Welcome to the Indie Beacon Show, where readers can discover great new indie authors. Find us on all major podcast systems and YouTube. Join Diann Floyd Boehm on today's show.
Welcome to the Indie Beacon Show with your host, Diann Floyd Boehm. We have a fabulous author with us today, and I'm going to let her introduce herself, and away we go.
I'm Little Botkin, and I'm very pleased to be here.
Well, we are so happy to have you here, and I know everyone's going to love to hear your story and all about yourself. I know personally, I'm very, very excited. Well, let's start off with where you're from, where you are now, etc.
I was born in the Panhandle, but I was raised in El Paso, but I moved to Central Texas about 35 years ago. I live in Dripping Springs, which is just, they call it west of Weird, but that's where I live, in Dripping Springs. So, and I've been here with my husband, and my two boys came with us, and one lives here and one lives up in New Mexico. And then I taught school here for 30 years, and now I'm just kind of enjoying being an author.
Well, that's fabulous. So you have kids already grown up, and yet you look like you should only be having babies.
No, I'm old as dirt, believe me.
Now, Dripping Springs, for those who don't know, is a lovely area. So I just lived over there in Westlake, which is about maybe 20-30 minutes away from you. And so I can say that there was actually a great store. I don't even know if it's still there, about I think it was called
Cowgirls and Lace. Yeah. Westlake used to be, well, no, it was the Lake Travis used to be part of our district, and it was called the Big Split, the Big Divide, when they broke off. And we are the low men on the totem pole, and Westlake and Lake Travis, that's where all the highbrow people live. So,
well, it used to not be that way. Trust me, we used to be called the Cedar people. So
yeah, Cedar Choppers. I know. And now Dripping Springs has changed. Everybody's and their dog has moved out here. So
I know. I can actually remember when people were like, wait, we do rodeos.
Yes, exactly. I used to have kids who had their guns in the back of their pickups, when they drive in, no problem.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I grew up in Deer Park, good town, very similar to that. But the main part about you is, so how did you get started writing?
I got a degree in English from the University of Texas at El Paso. I wasn't going to be a teacher. I was going to be a technical writer and go work in the Peace Corps. And then I met my husband. And so I had to go back and get my teaching certification, because obviously I wasn't going to leave the country. And so when I started teaching, of course, I taught English. I noticed that many of my students wrote beautifully. They were not afraid. I guess that's what it is, that they were fearless, and they would write things and I'd say, oh my gosh, I can't believe this imagery, or how did they come up with this? And so I just didn't think I could write like that. But I knew that I could research, and I wanted to work with them on how to write. There was the research paper of local history in Dripping Springs, because I love history. That was my minor. And so I started working with them to do this collection for Hays County. And we did it for 19 years.
Wow.
It's a well-known collection now. But when they did that, I realized how much I had loved research, always have. And so when I retired, right before I retired, my son was taking an advanced placement U.S. history class, American history class. And he brought a cartoon into my office, and it was of a man who had a noose around his neck. And it said Frank Little, IWW. And then there was a guy with a big top hat, and he was wearing a mask because he was a robber baron. He was an owner of a copper company.
Wow.
And he was putting coins into another man who was labeled the press. And he was saying, just tell them he was a traitor. Well, my son said, isn't that our uncle? And I said, yes. And I said, it is. And so I thought, I need to tell that story. I knew about him and the family, Frank Little. And so I went back and I thought, okay, when I retire, this is what I'm going to do. And it took me 10 years, because Frank was in 10 different states, and I had to go to all those states. I had to do deep archival research. And when you're a family member and you're writing about someone famous, or anybody related to the family, you have to worry about whether they're going to take you seriously. And I'd never written anything before. So I did. And then I got to the point where, well, how am I going to publish this? And I used to teach my high school seniors that when they were applying for college, you pick one really high school that you have a slim chance getting into, a middle one, and then one that you go to ACC if you have to, Austin Community College. So I thought I'll use that same practice myself. And I looked for I went to a university press and I looked at which ones did Western history, military history, even a little bit of women's history and labor history. And it was University of Oklahoma Press. And they are the premier press for Western literature, nonfiction.
How about that?
As it turned out, I mean, I had a slim chance and I could not tell which acquisitions editor to go to. So I emailed the editor in chief, and it turned out he had been the editor of the Montana Historical Quarterly for like 13, 14 years before he went to OU Press, and he knew my story. He knew Frank, and it had never been told before, and what was out there was wrong. He goes, I want it.
Wow.
And that relationship with him, he's no longer with them. He is my editor. Even on another book that I'm working on right now, and the one that's coming out this week, he's still my editor as a friend. He goes through and reads my work and makes suggestions. And so it just was a blessing. It just worked out beautifully.
What a wonderful story. And I'm sure your former students are so proud to be able to say that you were their teacher.
Yeah, they follow along. I mean, they follow me along on Facebook and they know what I'm doing. 3 different schools way back from, I taught in the Panhandle first, and those kids are like 3 years younger than me.
Yeah.
They're retired now too, but they all follow along.
Oh, that is wonderful. Well, I'm sure that this book is extremely inspiring, and the way you came about writing is exciting as well. We're going to be cutting to a commercial because we need to let our sponsors share what they're all about, and we'll get right back to you. So this is the Indie Beacon Show, and enjoy listening to our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Rox Berkey. I write the Enigma series with my co-author. We write as Brakefield and Berkey. Today we have 12 books in this series, with The Enigma Threat being the newest release on January the 8th of 2021. It's an exciting book that goes to the next generation, and we hope that you'll check it out and all the other books in the Enigma series. Thank you.
Lone Star Festival, a Texas-sized event. Meet authors, artists, and Texas musicians in the city of Seguin on May 29, 2021. Sponsored by Real Seguin, Coffee Shop, Authors Marketing Guild, B4R.store, and Dear Texas. Produced by Texas Authors Institute of History. Join us and get your free tickets online at lonestar.book. Marianne Fairmouth is a career consultant with 30 years experience in the national recruiting world, a multi-award-winning author in multi-genres, and a speaker that gives presentations to help you succeed. Her book, Revolutionary Recruiting, made the top 20 global list of recruiting books. Find her on Amazon, your favorite bookstore, or at fairmouth.com. Lone Star Festival, where Texas authors, artists, and creatives come together for a Texas-sized event. Join us on May 29, 2021 from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Seguin Coliseum, Seguin, Texas. Free for everyone. Produced by Texas Authors Institute of History. Sponsored by B4R.store, Authors Marketing Guild, and the City of Seguin. More information at lonestar.bookfestival.network. Welcome to the Indie Beacon Show, where readers can discover great new indie authors. Find us on all major podcast systems and YouTube. Join Mary Ann Fairmouth on today's show.
So now we know all about how you started writing, but how did you come up with what you're working on now and the whole idea behind your new book?
The book I'm working on right now is a memoir. And that came about mainly because of going to a conference for women writing in the West in San Antonio. Excuse me. And I started telling them stories one night, a group of women stories one night about being at the Miss Texas pageant. I was Miss El Paso. And they started laughing. And I guess I'm a clown. I just got them laughing. And there was actually an agent sitting at the table. And she said, you need to write this story. So I went back to my hotel room and I thought about it. And I realized it was a deeper story because it's also a mother-daughter story. But the book is called The Pink Dress, Memoir of a Guy Rex Girl. I was the first Guy Rex girl, which means that Richard Guy and Rex Holt were the beauty queen makers in Texas. They were the pageant kings. And they got into the business and I was their first girl. I was the guinea pig. And there was a lot of angst during this year with them. They were so successful that they were invited to be on the Miss Texas, Miss America board. And then from there, they ended up buying the Miss Texas for Miss USA pageant. They bought the Miss California pageant. And they ended up producing 5 Miss USAs and having runners up for Miss Universe. But they learned on me. And while they were learning on me, at my home, my parents were having difficulties, and my mother and I in particular were having a lot of trouble. So the whole story kind of comes together. It's that frame. And when I got back the next morning at this conference, I told the agent, I said, I think I'm going to do this, but it's really a story about my mother. And she says, just be ready for it to be painful. You just be ready. And it has been, but it's been my COVID book, and it's been a fun book too. And so I've really enjoyed it. I'm almost finished with it, but it's so different than the historical nonfiction that I typically write. Mm-hmm. All my friends are ready for it. And, it's going to be people who are interested in the Texas Beauty Queen pageant, because Texas was so big compared to all the other states as far as the beauty pageant queen business goes. And then it's going to be that mother-daughter story, and then of course, Guy and Rex, the deal with Guy and Rex. And the agent was just really interested in the Guy Rex story because they are well known. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so I'm excited about it. I mean, it's fun, and I've had fun writing it.
I bet you had, and I bet in ways it's could make you closer to your mom on a spiritual level too, right? Because
she passed away. She passed away a couple of years ago, and we had a very contentious relationship. And in the end, my parents did get divorced, and she moved here in Wimberley near me because she needed a daughter to take care of her. And, here she was. And I was like, oh my. And so, but then she got lung cancer. And so in the last couple of years of her life, I was taking her to the doctor 2 and 3 times a week. In the last 3 months, it was more so. And she started opening up and telling me what was going on in the household with my father and the family at the same time. And it was like all of a sudden I got it. So it's also a book of forgiveness,
right?
The book of forgiveness as well. But yeah, I'm tickled with it. And my editor, who's a superb, he's well known for Western nonfiction, is reading this. And of course, I'm talking about how they taped breasts to get cleavage, and he's having to read all this stuff. And I think he's fascinated with it. I think, but anyway.
Well, there's so many facets to the story. I know I'm personally very excited about, because I was in the Miss America ones. Yes. So it's 2 different ones.
Yes, and I went too.
Okay. Just so the viewers know. Yeah. And so you had such a different experience. And so did they make you weigh a certain weight, or?
I weighed, I think, 132 pounds when I became Miss El Paso. In 6 weeks, I was 116, and I'd lost 9 inches because they put me on a 900 calorie a day diet and supplied amphetamines. I was taking diet pills, and back in the 1971, those were strong pills.
Very strong.
It was very strong. But what they did is they were known for their designer gowns. And I showed up in Fort Worth with 4 gowns. Most girls had $50 to go buy a swimsuit and a gown. I showed up with 4 designer gowns, and they sewed the waist and all the dresses to 19 and a half inches. My waist was 21, and I was threatened that—
Which is great.
Yeah, I know. But they threatened me that if I ate, their idea was they were going to pinch that dress together and zip me up And if I ate anything, I wouldn't be able to get into the dresses. And so it didn't take long. You know this then from the Miss Texas, Miss America pageant, no man was supposed to touch you. You can't have one around you. So they couldn't do anything. They couldn't come up to my room, but they spied on me constantly.
Goodness.
And so my roommates figured it out. And one night, this girl brought in, she was competing for Miss Congeniality, and she brought in this sheet cake. It was a Texas-sized cake, half of a banquet table in the shape of Texas. And all 63 of us were labeled on there. And we sneaked out during the middle of the night and went downstairs, and I had been craving food so badly. I was from El Paso, so I ate all of West Texas. And because I was born in the Panhandle, I think I wrote in the book, I ate from Muleshoe to Childress. And I mean, all the area I ate all the Panhandle, all of West Texas. They ate South Texas and some of Central Texas. And we left just some crumbs of East Texas. 4 of us ate this cake. And the next morning, this girl went in there, she's my cake. And we were like, oh, well, we're sorry, but we did. That's what we did. It was kind of the ornery thing I did during that pageant. But at that point, I was on a sugar high all day, obviously. And I wasn't stealing hot rolls at the luncheons when Guy wasn't watching. I was just,
you were having fun.
I was having fun by then. Yeah.
Which leads us now to having fun with your new book. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Because I know I'm excited about it.
My newest book is called The Girl Who Dared to Defy Jane Street and the Rebel Maids of Denver. And I came across her when I was writing my Frank Little book. There was a massacre in Colorado. It's called the Ludlow Massacre. It is a watershed event. It happened in 1914, where you had this tent colony of coal miners and their families. They were all immigrants, and they were on strike. And because they were on strike, the Rockefeller, who pretty much owned everything, they were evicted from their company housing. And so they put up these tents. And Rockefeller and his goons, he sent in this army of men who had a Gatling gun, machine gun mounted. And they fired on these tents with these people. And there were hundreds of children. And they had dug pits underneath their tents because they knew this could happen. And in this situation, there were 2 mothers who died and 9 children. There were 11 people who died because of this. Jane Street knew about it, read about it. She just decided she was going to change things up. And she wasn't even from Colorado, and she shows up.
Authors Marketing Guild, a membership-owned company where authors can learn how to better market and sell their books. Join us at authorsmarketingguild.com.
Factor 7, the newest thriller by author J.D. May, will keep you turning the pages with mystery, betrayal, lies, and infidelity. Ripped from the headlines, Factor 7 follows 2 prominent doctors who uncover a clandestine plot to spread a bioweapon with a 98% mortality rate. Journey with them as they experience a world of murder, power, intrigue, and corruption, where it becomes deadly clear that exposing the truth is just as dangerous as the weapon they seek to expose.
Publishing marketing package for authors. A $1,500 value, save 40% now. Includes a 6-piece marketing kit of 250 bookmarks, 250 business cards, 250 postcards, 1 table banner, 1 table runner, and 50 download cards, plus book cover design, ebook creation, PDF setups, upload Jingle Spark, scroll placement, video commercial, and interview on IBS. Plus much more. Email bourgeoismedia@look.com for details or bourgeoismedia.com.
Hi, I'm Mel Greenberg, author of Running with Our Eyes Closed, book 1 in the Empty Nested series. To the world, Samantha has the perfect life. 3 wonderful children, a loving husband, so she thought, and a life split between Dallas and Italy. When her youngest leaves for college, it all comes crashing down, forcing Samantha to re-examine everything. Over 7 days in one of the most romantic countries in the world, Samantha faces the past she thought she'd overcome and begins to redefine her role as a woman, a wife, and a mother.
What would you do if you had to put your life on hold to care for a loved one? Well, during COVID, almost all of us have been doing just that. I'm Charlotte Canyon, award-winning author, actress, and speaker. And my book, You Have to Laugh to Keep from Crying, shows you how you can revive, thrive, and survive with 4 golden rules. You have to love one another. You have to respect one another. You have to have patience with one another. And most of all, you've got to forgive one another. I'm Charlotte Canyon, and I approve this message.
Welcome to the Indie Beacon Show, where readers can discover great new indie authors. Find us on all major podcast systems and YouTube. Join Mary Ann Fairmont on today's show.
Well, welcome back, and let's get going. So, share where we left off. You were talking about your new book. Can you share with us what you hope to accomplish as far as inspiration for your readers?
You know, what I've tried to do with both the Frank Little book and The Girl Who Dared to Defy is I want to write with integrity. I want to write with as much truth as I can. And I think anybody who's a nonfiction writer, you have to go to the primary sources, go to the root sources to get your stories. And what I found out was, with Frank Little in particular, you get a lot of these scholarly people. I'm not a scholarly person, I'm just an author. But you get these scholarly people who write nonfiction, and then everybody copies what they wrote because they take that as gospel. And if one person makes a mistake, then that misinformation is repeated for years. And so what I am trying to do is I'm trying to make sure that when I get my information, I go to the horse's mouth if I can. I rarely will use anything that somebody else has written. What I will do is I will go in and see, where did you get that information? Then I will go to that same source. I'll go to that same primary source and I'll assess it for myself. But even better, if I can use personal papers, interviews, that sort of thing from either families or actually, maybe it's the Bureau of Investigation files, but I go to the primary sources. Even, newspapers have mistakes. They were notoriously biased.
Right.
One thing that I used to tell my students is that when you collect anecdotes, normally they're exaggerated, may not be true, but usually when there's an anecdote in a family or an anecdote about a story, there is like a mustard seed of truth in it. Mm-hmm. And so you have to learn how to peel that back and find it. So I like to write, I like to have lots of texture in my context, but I've got to have that integrity of the story. And that is why when we talk about writing fiction, historical fiction, I want to see that integrity in that context, even though the story is totally made up, but I want to see that context to be real. If it's not, then I'm not interested even in the historical fiction. Right. So to me, that's everything.
That's wonderful. And it's a great guide. How can people find your books and order?
These last two books, the University of Oklahoma Press published them. Obviously, you can go to oupress.com and order them. Every bookstore, you can either order or buy it in the bookstore. Amazon, of course, has them. So that's not an issue. The Girl Who Dared to Defy is actually coming out tomorrow, or it's coming out February 25th. And already they've been selling them. So, and I think it just takes they have them on demand. They're ready to go. So that's not a problem. Barnes and Nobles has them.
Can you tell everyone the name of your website?
My website is Jane Little, Little, Botkin, B as in boy, OTKIN.com.
Great.
And on my website, I have a description of all the books I've written. I have photo galleries from the places I had to go to research, or awards places, conferences. I have a blog. I have not done much blogging this year, but I've got a lot there, as far as what I have written. And you can get all the information there, and I keep it updated, and I'm adding events as we get them. So.
Okay, great. And are you on Instagram as well?
I'm not on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Facebook.
Okay, I want them to make sure they can find you in every single corner as possible.
Thank
and
you.
In closing, if you were to say one thing to let people know how exciting it is and important it is to be a historical fiction writer and inspire them, what would that be?
You mean a nonfiction writer?
Yeah, nonfiction, sorry, historical fiction, yeah.
Yeah, well, to be any writer, to be any author, actually, it's hard work. but it's something that can be done, because I certainly didn't think I could. And then I learned that writing a book is like doing a sculpture. It's like being an artist, because you constantly go in and you reshape and you rework the words, and you're sculpting constantly. And you finally get that product. You may not think at the very end, you may think, well, I could have tweaked it a little bit more. It's always that way, just like with a piece of art, but you learn and you can improve. And I thought you had to have that talent from the get-go, but you actually get better at it the more you do it. The more you write, you get better.
Right. The more you do it. So that is the key, the more you do it. Well, this has been a wonderful interview to learn about you. And I just know everyone's going to want to have your book. So say the website again one more time.
JaneLittleBotkin.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I hope one day I get to meet you in person.
I like that. Nice to meet you.
That's great. Well, that's it for the Indie Beacon show today. And make sure to stay tuned and hear more about the rollouts of her books in the future.
Thank you for watching or listening to the Indie Beacon Show, produced by Diann Bourgeois for the Authors Marketing International LLC. Copyright 2021. Voiceover by Diann Bourgeois. If you would like to be a sponsor of the show, please email us at authorsmarketing@outlook.com. If you would like to be on the show, please complete the form found on our website at indiebeacon.com. You may also watch previous year's shows on the website. Music is Frolic of Words, created for Indie Beacon